Today, we have a cut of meat that I think is unpopular, it's underrated, it's a hidden gem, and it's inexpensive. Any guesses? Welcome to the Adventures of Carlian channel, where we're always pursuing our passions, trying to do our best and learn new things and improve ourselves a little by little every day. If you're all for it, then give us a sub and hit the bell icon so you know when all of our videos are posted. Now today, we're talking about this mysterious cut of meat. It's simple to cook with, and it is honestly inexpensive. Compared to the other meats, it's definitely inexpensive. And it's called flat meat. That's not a very welcoming name and sounds kind of gross. But honestly, I think you guys will enjoy it. What is flat meat? It's basically this coarse grained cut of meat that is found in the short loin, and it sits right next to the flank. Other names you can find of flat meat are flap steak, still not as inviting, beef bavette, has that Frenchy ooh la la to it, or faux hanger, also not inviting. So one of those sounds pretty nice. The others, not so much, but translated, it's just also beef flap. Even though the name isn't inviting, it is starting to grow in popularity. It's still not there yet, not like the other cuts of meat, but you know, I'm starting to see it in places like Costco, big supermarkets. So that to me, if it's at Costco, then I know that it's coming up. It's almost there. You know, it's almost going to be as prized as the other cuts of meat, hopefully. And yeah, so here are some interesting tips about flat meat. Flat meat is incredibly versatile. Because of its grain and its loose fibers, it holds onto pretty much any kind of marinade. Flat meat is best when using a high heat method of cooking, so grilling, broiling, pan searing, which is what we're going to do in our recipe later in this video. Another thing about flat meat is that you don't want to cook this too rare because it tends to be very chewy. Unless you're gonna cut it very thin, I would go to the sweet spot of medium rare. Now, if you go too far, obviously it's gonna be tough and dry. Speaking of doneness and cooking, you wanna be aware that the tips are thinner than the middle. So you're gonna run into the problem of the middle part not getting cooked enough and the tips being overcooked. You have a couple options here. One, you can either cut the steak into sections and then cook it accordingly. And the second option is to fold the tips off the pan and onto the middle and then continue to cook that middle section. For our next tip, if you're using a thermometer to check the doneness of your steak, which you should, temp it at a diagonal. So insert the whole thermometer at a diagonal instead of straight down, then you'll get a much accurate read on the temperature. And finally, you want to rest at least 5 minutes after cooking, just like any other steak, before cutting it, before slicing it, and you want to cut it against the grain, which you already know. Now, I know this is tricky with this cut of meat because it's long. You're going to end up with like a 2-foot piece of cut flat meat. So I'll show you in a bit. We'll get into the kitchen, how to cut it, how to cook it, and all that jazz. So yeah, let's just jump in the kitchen now. To make our garlic honey marinated flat meat, you're gonna need garlic paste, white balsamic, olive oil, honey, salt, fresh dill, and of course flat meat. In a jar, you're gonna combine 3 tablespoons of garlic paste, 2 tablespoons of white balsamic vinegar, 1/4 cup of olive oil, 2 tablespoons of honey, a healthy pinch of salt, and 1 tablespoon of fresh dill. The dill is definitely optional. You can substitute it for any other fresh herb. You're gonna cover this jar up and shake the crap out of it just to mix the marinade really well. Next, you're gonna pour it onto 2 pounds of flat meat. You're gonna get in there, massage it, and make sure it gets into all of those fibers. Next, you're gonna get your stainless steel pan or even a cast iron pan, ripping hot, add some oil, and then start searing off your meat. We want a good caramelization out of both sides of the meat, and you're gonna cook this to a temperature of about 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Then you're gonna let it rest for at least 5 minutes before cutting this. Speaking of cutting, the way to cut your flat meat is, if it is this middle piece or the thicker piece, cut it with the grain in the width that you would like your slices to be. Turn it 90 degrees and then cut your slices against the grain. For the tips or the thinnest part of the flat meat, you're going to do the exact same thing, except for when you're cutting against the grain, cut it at a slight diagonal. So there you have it. That is our garlic honey marinated flat meat. I hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to catch us on all the socials, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.